Good morning. Hey, can I ask a favor of you? Everybody stand up, real quick. Oh, man, I was so comfortable. All right, just listen up. You've been sitting there for 45 minutes or so. Shake the hand of the person next to you, and then go ahead and sit back down if you don't know him. How many of you, when you were a kid or even as adults, raced remote control cars? Look at all of you. So earlier this year, I actually went to race a remote control car. I was in Las Vegas, and I'm not a big remote control car guy. But I was standing next to a guy, and the starting light went red, yellow, green, and I won. That wasn't all that interesting. I'm not just up here to brag. But what was interesting is I had no manual control of that remote control car. I was actually controlling the remote control car with my brain. You see, this is a device made by a company called Emotive that's an EEG. And I actually control the remote control car with my brainwaves. Pretty remarkable. And I ended up speaking with the founder of this organization, a gal by the name of Tan Lee. And this isn't what they do. They don't allow people to just race remote control cars with their brainwaves, but what they do is make EEG technology affordable for everybody, and there's lots of amazing implications for our world. One of those is this story. Emotive partnered with Smirnoff for a project called MindTunes, and there were several physically disabled musicians that couldn't move. One or two of them couldn't even talk. And what they were able to do is take brainwaves and convert those to sound waves. And it's an amazing story because they actually were able to make music by simply thinking about it. Fascinating times, and we are living in such an incredible time. Shortly after this time, I got to try Oculus's next generation virtual reality headset. Any of you tried this? Okay, it's set to release next year. And if you're anything like me, I had never really tried virtual reality. It was something that was relevant, but off to the fringe, you know, it's for those gamers. But I was absolutely blown away. 3D, fully immersive experiences. One of the vignettes is I was in the middle of like a Transformers movie, and things were moving around me, and I was ducking. And even though I knew cognitively it wasn't real, it felt really, really weird, really, really real. And the potential implications for this exploded in my mind, from a marketing perspective, from a psychology perspective, from a professional sports and training perspective. Virtual reality is going to change our world like we can't imagine. And for those of you sitting there saying, I don't think it'll impact my role, just remember, people said the same thing about email and about the internet and about mobile phones. Virtual reality is the next frontier. I put this slide up here for a couple of reasons. This is Jeremy Beilenson, founding director of the Stanford Virtual Human Interaction Lab. Number one, his quote, I think, frames our reality really, really well. I've seen more technological change in the last 8 months than I have in the last 19 years combined. Maybe some of you feel this. Maybe you don't quite feel it yet. But if you don't, it's coming. And Lori talked a lot about the pace of exponential change. We're used to technological change. A lot of us in the audience are familiar with technology. What we're not really understanding collectively is the pace is exponential. Over the next couple of decades, we will literally have a century's worth of technological innovation. The other reason why I have this slide and how it ties to virtual reality is his rig in their lab cost in excess of $40K, but they just replaced it with Oculus for a few $100. And while this pace of exponential change accelerates, the capabilities are becoming democratized, and this is just one example. I had the opportunity to talk to a guy named Gary Flake, who's an early internet pioneer, really, really early pioneer for machine learning, and he began to explore what it looks like when these two technologies come together. And he began to envision a world where when we can track our brainwaves and actually manifest our thoughts in a virtual world that feels so real, all connected to the internet and powered by the cloud, unlimited memory, unlimited processing power, access to thousands of artificial intelligence agents in real time, my mind explodes, and I don't know about yours. But the potentials are endless, and this isn't that far. This is not as far as most of us would believe. So I think we have to ask the question, in a world like this, How does this impact our roles? How does this impact our business models? How does this impact our distribution networks? We're really talking about shortening the distance between desire and manifestation. And that's what consumers are after anyway, aren't they? I think about it, and I want to have it now. How many of you have iPhones in the audience? Okay, do me a favor. Jeez, almost unanimous. Break out your iPhone for me real quick. And this is kind of weird for a speaker. Normally, we're telling you to silence your phones. Go ahead and find the icon that says health, if you have it, if you know where it is. And look in there, and there's a little segment called nutrition. And you'll see in that nutrition segment biotin, caffeine, calcium, carbohydrates, a whole bunch of nutritional data. And you couple that with results and your sleep and your vitals. Apple's already thinking about this stuff. There's already several integrations to be able to capture this data in real time. And if we have this data in real time, what can we do with it? Well, if I've got my nutrition data and all of my bio and my vitals, could it be relatively easy for some form of artificial intelligence to say, hey, you should be eating this next. You should be eating this next. This is the best thing for you based on your stated goals. We're not that far away from that. And so shortening the distance between desire and manifestation is really what we should all be focusing on because our consumers are demanding it. Anybody know who this guy is? Anybody recognize him? His name is Peter Diamandis. He's author of a couple of best-selling books. He's founder of an organization called X Prize, pretty well-regarded management thinker and futurist. And I don't think I've ever done this in a keynote before, but I'm going to actually read something that he wrote. And while I don't agree with everything in his view of the future of retail, I think it provokes us to think. So I'm going to read it for you, and I'd like you to think about if a world like this existed in the near future, say in the next 5 years, how would that impact you and your organization and your role? You won't drive to a store, ever. Eventually, clothing stores will go away, dematerialized and significantly demonetized, just like Amazon has done to most bookstores. Your body is scanned and the data file is private. It's your exact body on that exact day. You put on your VR goggles and appear in a virtual store. 0 time to get there. No traffic, no parking, no walking across the mall to get to the store, no browsing through the store. You enter your personal clothing store. Everything in the store is your exact size. Everything fits. The store has every designer and every design on the planet. Forget retail, this is me-tail. Your friend, who you called a few minutes ago, joins you via their VR headset, and he or she sees everything you see. The experience is social and fun. You voice what you're looking for. Red high-heeled shoes to match my new dress, which has a long black skirt. Given that most of the audience is male, that's sort of interesting. Suddenly, think the movie Matrix, racks of perfectly fitting products appear like magic. When you see an outfit you like, you just point and instantly an image of your virtual avatar that you see in the mirror is wearing it. No frustration of getting undressed and redressed. Your virtual reflection in the virtual mirror moves as you do. It feels and looks perfectly real. You wonder aloud how these virtual shoes would look with a particular blouse in your closet at home. No problem. Every piece of physical clothing you own in the real world is also available for you to wear in this virtual world. You ask, and instantly you're wearing it. When you're done, and you have the exact perfect clothes you need, you pay the bill, and your clothes arrive the next day. And if the warehouse or robotic manufacturer is local, perhaps the same day. Oh, and by the way, the cost for an outfit is at least half of what it is today, because there is no middleman. So we could talk about that for the rest of the time, but we won't. We can maybe talk about it afterwards. But I think at the very least, hopefully, that brings up some questions in your mind. What if this were true for what our organization makes and how we distribute? How would this change things? If there were no stores, which, by the way, I don't believe they're going away, but if there were significantly less stores, how would that impact us? We know this to be true. Our consumers are changing, right? They've got more capabilities and choices. They've got more power. Their path is becoming more fragmented. They're more digital. There's more channels to deal with. They've got more expectations. This is the consumer that we're dealing with today, all of us. Even if you're selling primarily to B2B and you're targeting your customers, ultimately, It's the consumers that's buying your product. And I don't care what industry you're in, and I've done this across industries, and I've said this, and nobody's ever argued with this, but at the very essence of what your customers want, they want one of two things. Help me accomplish what I'm trying to do, and or help me feel good. That's it. That's really all we're trying to do. But doing this is really hard. First of all, you've got to understand what it is they're trying to do. And you've got to understand what motivates their emotions and feelings. And if we think about compressing the time between desire to manifestation, and even though the scenarios that I've laid out are futuristic, we're already on the path, right? If you think about Amazon Prime Now, who's heard of Amazon Prime Now? Okay, they just opened this up in my area. I'm in Southern California. Basically, free 2-hour delivery. If you want 1-hour delivery, it's $7.99. Uber Dash is doing the same thing in the Northeast. Instacart is doing the same thing in lots of geographic areas. So now I can at least think of something, and I've got to do the old-fashioned step of actually going to a computer and ordering it, or on my mobile phone, still, until these EEG headsets get hooked up to all of us, right? The really old-fashioned thing of actually ordering. But within an hour or two, it's there. Lori talked about 3D printing, right? 3D printing is advancing too. I can 3D print food. I can 3D print lots of new things. So the idea of conceiving something, designing it, and printing it, and having it manifest itself, we are already compressing the time between desire and manifestation. Anybody heard of Magic? Magic is a brand new service. You can actually text this right now if you want to. And basically, you just text them whatever you want. And they say, okay, we'll bring it to you in X amount of time for X amount of money. You good with that? Say, okay. They're creating a back-end distribution network and supply chain and value chain that enables them to do this. They're absorbing the hassle of searching out and arranging all of those services today. It's very early. They're in beta. If you want to take a shortcut to the front of the line, I think they ask you to pay $100 or something like that. Really early. And while I don't know if Magic will stick around or not, all these signs are indicative of where the world is heading. The head of Hershey R&D was talking about the pressure that they're under, similar pressure to probably many of you. That it used to be how someone either wanted a treat or they wanted something that was good for them, right? And now the consumer wants both. And he told this little anecdote about how, it used to be that from a cell phone perspective, if you wanted really, really good coverage, you were willing to pay for it and pay a premium. However, if you wanted to pay a little bit less, you were okay with a little bit less coverage. But what do we all expect now, right? We expect the best, always-on, perfect coverage for a little bit of price. Of course, we're all unreasonable. We've been set up to be unreasonable. And this is not just true from a personal perspective. This is set up from a corporate perspective as well. A couple of guys from Accenture, Larry Nunez, a couple of guys from Accenture basically looked at the pace of innovation, and Clayton Christensen is one of the most respected innovation thinkers of our time. And these guys said, hey, that's not necessarily how things are happening today. We're all familiar with Rogers market segments made possible by crossing the chasm, where we've got the innovators, early adopters, early majority, late majority, and laggards. But they observed something happening in the marketplace that wasn't quite following that strategy. You see, traditional business strategy said you can compete generally on one of three things: either cost advantage, customer intimacy, or product innovation. If you ever try and compete on more than one of those at once, you're done, you're finished. But what he found is, as we get connected into this digital world, people were competing on all three at once and targeting mass segments and winning. So what's a tangible example of this scenario? You guys remember Garmin, TomTom, right? Very good companies that were offering a very, very valuable tool that people were happy to pay $300, $400, $500, $600 for. All of a sudden, Google came out with something for free that was better, that was cheaper, and all of a sudden those guys, business as they knew it, sort of went away, and they're having to reinvent themselves as well. WhatsApp and Snapchat are reinventing communications, and they're stealing billions of dollars away from the telecommunications industry because of this big bang disruption. And we see this more often than not. As we get connected, we realize we're all nodes in a network. We are transitioning into a networked world, and this is true of organizations, this is true of individuals, This is true of things, of cars, of toasters, of appliances, of surfboards, of oil rigs. We are all now nodes in a network, and that has implications, actually, because there's this new model. If we have sensors, whether specifically sensors that are called sensors or things like social networks, things that gather data and share them and make them publicly available or available within networks, we have this model where we can gather this data and apply algorithms and analytics to make sense of that data, which provides us with insights. These insights add a layer of AI, and now we've got recommendations on what we should be doing next. And the next generation of enterprise applications and consumer applications will actually allow you to take action right in that moment. There's several new concierge services, Facebook M, Operator, which are messaging services, but they're allowing you to take action and buy a product within the context of that message in real time, for one example. And we're seeing this regardless of your role, regardless of your function. This is the cycle of the new business model as we get connected. We're seeing some interesting things, and I wrestled with this for a long time, actually several years, probably 7 or 8 years. I kind of asked myself and would have this debate with other leaders, with other executives, and I asked, with this digitization, are we going to see more fragmentation, or are we going to see more consolidation? And it was actually, I know there's Deloitte folks in the room. There's a couple of guys that work for Deloitte Center for the Edge, John Hagel, John Seeley Brown, and they actually articulated this very well. That as we become connected, we're seeing both happen at the same time. We're seeing fragmentation happen because the costs to create something new have fallen dramatically. There are no more barriers. Any one of us, if we wanted to and we were bold enough, could start a business for a few $100. We've got apps. There's entire companies being built on open source software, and they're creating millions and hundreds of millions of value because of it. So we're seeing fragmentation. You guys feel it because of the startups that are nipping at your heels and taking market share away from you. But at the same time, we're also seeing consolidation because the big players have this large distribution, and these very tiny niche players are being gobbled up and participating in the network that's being created. So large companies, for the most part, as they exist today, have a choice, right? They can become the platform. They can become the aggregator. They can become the intermediary. Or they can break up into smaller companies and become niche players. If you look at an organization like Etsy, well, different from what you do, everybody know what Etsy is, right? They're a marketplace for handcrafts. They didn't exist 8 years ago. Now they've got over 1 million stores. They do over $1 billion worth of transactions, and they are the platform for handcrafted goods, and they continue to expand. We see the same thing with Kickstarter. We see the same thing with Shapeways, with 3D printing. These platforms are broadening and becoming the intermediary for small, niche, specialized, focused, highly targeted players. We could talk a lot about what's happening in the world and what's happening in the industry, but I want to talk about some key indicators today. Things that we should probably be focused on, especially in the context of this room, and we could talk about a whole lot more, but I want to highlight 3. Number 1, you all know this, right? Attention is fleeting and fragmented. Number 2, brand loyalty is dying. And number 3, large CPG brands are losing market share, and they have been for several years. Google and Shopper Sciences did a study a few years ago, and this is when a big light bulb went off for me, and they tracked 3,000 consumers across a variety of industries, automotive, retail, financial services, and they tracked their paths to purchase. And anybody have a guess on how many different paths to purchase there were over those 3,000 consumers? 3,000! I kind of set you up for that one. Exactly right. I would have expected a few hundred, right? There's got to be some commonality because that's the way we build our organizations. For those in marketing, we build a customer journey, and we set to this, and we have segments. There were 3,000 different paths to purchase. And those paths to purchase transcend physical and digital. They transcend devices. They transcend channels. They have different epochs and spaces of time between them. And it's really, really hard to get these folks engaged with us in a way that's memorable and meaningful and trackable. And great organizations like SAP are trying to build the technology to capture this in a better way. But attention is fleeting and fragmented. Brand loyalty is also dying, and while there's data that might suggest the opposite, most of the data suggests that, yes, consumers and customers across industries have less barriers to switch. Therefore, if they're not happy, they'll happily go somewhere else. This is one data point taken out of the Deloitte American Pantry study. 3 out of 4 packaged goods categories have seen a decline in must-have brand loyalty since 2011. It's not good enough to just say, hey, we've been around for 20 years, you've known us, we've been trusted in your cupboard. That still exists, but it's fading. And large CPG brands are continuing to lose market share. $4.5 billion in this past year alone was gobbled up by small and medium-sized businesses. The majority of the growth in CPG is coming from the small and mid-sized organizations, and it's being cannibalized. The consumers are the ones that are driving these changes. So I think it behooves us to maybe think about what consumers want. Broadly, I wrote a blog post a few years ago called 6 Things Consumers Want. You can look at that. But more specifically to what's changed recently, we're seeing this trend, obviously. And these are the things that our consumers are wanting. Simple, transparent, sustainable, and natural. And we see a lot of the high-growth brands and a lot of the high-growth products and services. They contain many of these characteristics. Consumers are demanding this stuff, and it's evidenced by other startup technologies. Has anybody ever heard of this app, IPIT? IPIT? So you've probably observed that there are more dietary preferences and restrictions than there were 10 or 20 years ago. This app allows you to set those dietary restrictions and preferences, and actually, instead of going into the store and looking at all those ingredients that you can't quite understand and trying to figure out, can I eat this or not? This scans it, and you see there on the right-hand side, this is not for you. This does not meet your preferences. Or it says, yes, this is for you, right? And this is just one out of several apps that are beginning to provide this transparency. Another thing that I'm fascinated about, this is a molecular sensor from SCIO that actually allows you to take any product and scan it, and it shows you the chemical makeup of it. Now, why do we want that? Well, what's this cheese made out of? How many calories does it have? How many carbs? How much protein? How sweet is this watermelon? How healthy are my plants? And while this is an early stage beta prototype, this shows us where the world is going. We are digitizing the whole world. Everything is becoming digital, and when we have this data, we can add analytics and algorithms and recommendations, automation, all of these sorts of things. There was a study by the Corporate Executive Board that tracked consumer stickiness, and it evaluated 40 factors: pricing, brand awareness, brand loyalty, so on and so forth. There were 40 different factors that were evaluated that led to stickiness. And far and away, the number one thing was simplicity. That may not come as a surprise, but decision simplicity is what consumers want most today and right now. There is a ton of research that's fascinating research that says as we connect things to a network, complexity increases exponentially. If you want to read more on this, you can go to the New England Complex Systems Institute. Fascinating research, and we are approaching that. We're feeling it, but we're not explicitly articulating that. And if you want to do something that helps your consumers, make it simple. Make it easy to understand. There's plenty of data and research to suggest this, both going back from psychological studies and in recent consumers. And that goes hand in hand in trust. Has anybody ever read the book, The Speed of Trust by Stephen M.R. Covey? Great book. It takes this thing that we all know to be important, and it actually articulates very well the business value, gives you some guidelines on how to establish trust from a corporate perspective. But the thing that stands out to me, and the thing that I remember most, is this very, very simple quote. And he says, trust always affects 2 outcomes: speed and cost. When trust goes up, speed goes up and cost goes down. When trust goes down, speed goes down and cost goes up. That's a very profound statement, but if you think about it, it's very true. And in this era of transparency and connection, we need to establish trust with our consumers through all the different touch points, through our interactions with them. So customer experience is one of my favorite topics. It's where I spend a lot of my time, in addition to the future and the digitization of everything. But it's been really, really hard to articulate how do we measure it, what's the business value, and I just want to show you a couple of slides. Forrester Research every year ranks brands and organizations in terms of how they're ranked and how they're perceived in terms of customer experience. This organization, called Watermark Consulting, for the last several years, has been basically taking that data and overlaying it with financial performance. And consistently, the chart looks something like this. Customer experience leaders outperform the S&P 500 index by a significant amount. And obviously, they significantly outperform the customer experience laggards. Harvard Business Review did a similar study, and those that were perceived as leading-edge customer experience companies significantly outperformed lagging companies on a number of key business metrics you see here: profitability, quality, growth and revenue generation, market share, and customer retention rate. Customer experience, and a great customer experience, or consumer experience, if you will, has a significant impact. As we become connected and we experience shorter cycle times with our products and services, there's an argument to say that customer experiences is the last remaining bastion of true differentiation. It's complex, it's hard work, and it is a greenfield of opportunity for all of us over the next several years to figure out how do we make the experience of our customers, of our consumers, so simple, so good, so memorable that it sticks with us. Because if you can do that, you harness the benefits of word-of-mouth marketing, of loyalty, and if you can do it repeatedly. We see the trajectory here of how we started several years ago, several decades ago with product innovation, that moved to service innovation. We're now at a time where the next place that we need to be focusing our efforts is experience innovation. So eyes on the prize. If I was all of you, I'd be sitting here and I came to a conference and I'm supposed to get something back that's supposed to be helpful for me. But to apply it to what ends? And I think this is from a study you may have seen, but I wasn't surprised at the result, but I was surprised at the glaring priority for executives in consumer goods. When asked what is your top priority, and KPMG did this study, when asked what top priority is, far and away the number one thing is expansion or top line growth. 42% said that is their top priority. You can see a distant second is consumer trust. When asked, what are your biggest challenges? Far and away, number one, expansion or top-line growth. Number two was consumer trust, and then omni-channel strategy and technology. So the one question you should all be asking in this session and at this conference and in your job and in your day-to-day, how do I help this company grow? Because if you do, you should be recognized for that. Growth has been tough. And growth will probably continue to be tough, especially for large CPG brands. But what we do know is that the majority of the growth over the next several years will come from e-commerce. It will come from digital. The growth rate of e-commerce compared to broad-based retail is about, depending on the study, 3 to 7x times. So it's estimated by several different studies that 50% of the growth over the next decade will come from e-commerce. So it matters. And I know for many of you, some of you are doing some stuff with e-commerce. For most of you, it's like, man, that is a very, very small part of what we do, and it's really, really hard to justify the investment and the expense. But what we do know, indicatively looking at macro trends, is e-commerce will become easier as we figure out the supply chain issues and the costs and the distribution issues. So we've talked about a lot of things. Let's look at some specific examples that we can maybe learn from. There are a few companies that have taken the emerging capabilities of technology and they've actually applied that to their products. Anybody heard of Kite Hill? Kite Hill is rapidly growing, and they've basically created dairy products from plant-based food. And what they've done, or at least they pretend to say that they've done, is they're no longer off in the vegan area, right? They've said, we create a dairy product that is good enough to be in the dairy section. And they are in the dairy section of Whole Foods. And what they've gone is they've gone and they've re-engineered and reverse-engineered the molecular makeup of cheeses, and they've actually gone through the dairy process to actually create a food that's given them pretty remarkable growth early on. Anybody heard of Impossible Foods? These guys are interesting. You probably wouldn't have heard of them because they're not really going to market yet. I found out about them because there was a rumor that Google was trying to buy them for $300 million before they'd even hit the market. And this looks pretty good. And what they did is they looked and they analyzed at the molecular level the attributes of the proteins in the hamburger that made us appreciate what a hamburger actually was. And then they went out to the world and they found out, well, what are the proteins in plants and seeds that most closely mirror those attributes? And we're going to use those to create a hamburger made from plants that's similar in taste. I love the quote, and just so I don't mess it up, I'm gonna pull it out here. Their founder actually said this, and I love it, if I can find it. For thousands of years, we relied on animals as our technology to transform plants into meat, milk, and eggs. Impossible Foods has found a better way. Animals as technology. And then Suja, our friends down the street, just invested in 30% of Suja Foods. And what I like about these guys is they've taken the whole farm-to-table movement and they've made it packageable through cold pressure. You guys familiar with Suja? Okay, about little less than 4 years ago, there were a couple of people in a garage in San Diego that were hand-delivering cold-pressed juices. Last year, they did $40 million. They're on track to do $80 million in business this year. That's why Coke invested a lot of money in buying 30% stake. We can also learn from fast fashion. Anybody shop at Zara or have spouses that shop at Zara? Zara is a Spanish brand. And what's remarkable about them is if you think about fashion, and I don't know how much you know about fashion, but generally they're planning lines and trends 3 quarters in advance. The stuff for next summer is being done the previous fall, and it's a very, very long process. There's a lot of big bets that are made, then they ship it out to the stores, and then there's what? Markdowns, right? 40, 50, 60% off, because it's an educated guess based on what's going on the runways. Zara has compressed that time down to 15 days. Design, manufacturing, and shipping. And they ship in very small batches. And for those technologists in the room, they've basically taken the approach of agile development, and they've applied it to retail. And they continue to grow at an exponential pace. Their parent company is actually the second largest fashion retailer in the world. And I think there's a lot that we can learn from that, from being customer responsive. Because if I think about the consumer goods industry in a macro sense, we kind of do the same thing. Do a lot of customer feedback, then we make stuff, then we ship it out there, and then we hope, right? And then we have to mark it down, and we go through sales, and we go promotions. Zara has taken what used to be a 9-month process, and they've compressed it down to 15 days. And what's really, really interesting about the industry is there's this other startup now that is attempting to disrupt Zara called Misguided. And Misguided basically says if there's a trend that we identify, we need to have it in stores within 7 days. They provide new products on their website every day, and their CEO wants to push them to provide new products every hour. The speed of innovation and the consumer demand and the customer intimacy is changing really, really fast. Most of us are familiar with Dollar Shave Club and Harry's, the world of subscription retail. Anybody use Stitch Fix? Stitch Fix, for those that are unaware, basically allows you to speak with a personal stylist. This is for women. Speak with a personal stylist, tell them your preferences, and on a predetermined interval, they will send you clothes in a box. You get to open them up, try them out. You keep what you like, you send what you don't like back. If you don't keep anything, you just pay a small styling fee. If you keep something, then you're good. Customer intimacy, concierge, personal-like service that's being done and delivered. There's a similar service for men called Trunk Club that Nordstrom's just bought. And so we see the attempt at both customer intimacy and being responsive and providing a level of simplicity and care and service and experience that transcends anything else that's out there today. We also see the revenue model of subscription helping to smooth out some of that demand. Anybody used any of these services? Plated, HelloFresh, Blue Apron. Blue Apron is probably the only company you've never heard of that has a $2 billion valuation. Essentially what these organizations do is they give you fresh farm-to-table products in a box on a weekly or bi-weekly basis that everything is prepped for you and allow you to cook. So what I take from this is, wow, consumers are really interested in simple, they're really interested in fresh, they're really interested in convenient, and these organizations and several others have tried to package that up in a model that says, here you go, and you get to feel good because you actually know what's in your food. You actually know what's in it, and you get to participate in cooking and living a healthy lifestyle and feel good about yourself. And when I look at this and I contrast that with consumer packaged goods, there's a big difference. And I think it's something for consumer packaged goods to look at and say, well, listen, what is attracting consumers to identify with this model? And is it possible for us to decouple maybe some of the components and the capabilities of our supply chain to actually provide something in shorter time spans in different formats? Because we already have much of the distribution. We already have much of the capabilities. What would it look like for us to give consumers what they want, when they want it, in predefined intervals, in more transparent ways? I'm going to ask somebody to stand up and tell me, what is Red Bull? What is Red Bull? It's an energy drink, maybe, kind of, sort of. This is their website. This does not look like a brand or product website. These guys have taken content marketing to the extreme. How many people know that there's a Red Bull channel, right? I live in Southern California, the mecca of extreme sports. I've got 3 boys. We watch a lot of the Red Bull channel. And what's interesting about the Red Bull channel, and the reason why I bring it up here, this is not a brand new story, but I figured some of you might benefit from hearing it, is if attention is fragmented, how do we get the attention? What gets your attention? Something that helps you do what you're trying to do or helps you feel good, going back to those 2 basic premises. And these guys have done such a phenomenal job of identifying their target audience that they've created this vast media empire. Movies, webinars, games, everything that never mentions their product but speaks to the heart and the minds and the souls of their target demographic. And so if we're clamoring for attention, I think there's some clues to be learned from what Red Bull does. All right, let me ask the same question, different company. How about Under Armour? What is Under Armour? Athletic clothing. But if you talk to any of their executives, they will tell you they're a technology company. How many of you know that a couple of years ago they spent over $700 million to buy some apps? Right? I don't know if you know that. They acquired 130 million users that use apps to track their fitness. They use their Fitbits, they use their wearables, they track their running, they track their activities, they do all this stuff. And Under Armour uses this to learn more about their consumers. They're working on a proprietary wearable with HTC right now to track additional biometrics. And the reason is because they can use this data to help drive performance. So while other companies in the traditional lens view themselves as athletic apparel, Under Armour views their mission as driving performance. And they view themselves as a technology company. If you listen to their CEO and you look at some of the things that they're working on, as sensors become smaller, they actually can become the size of threads. And the CEO will tell you, you're crazy if you think people are going to carry around these smartphones for a long time, and this is going to be the only tool that we use to track our performance and our behavior. It's going to be in our clothing. I would argue that it will also be inside of us and on top of us, but that's a different argument. But Under Armour, I think we can learn a ton because they're coming from an industry that has very clearly defined guardrails, and they're saying, we're driving performance and we're leveraging technology to understand and to interact and to form community and to allow our community to participate and interact with themselves. And then we're creating a product that helps them achieve what they're trying to do and to feel good about what they're doing. So you can see by some of these examples, if I ask you to define some of these organizations and who they are and what they do, and I could do the same thing with Uber, and I could do the same thing with Google, and I could do the same thing with a lot of the organizations that are innovating out there, lines are blurring. And so I think it's a mistake. In fact, I know it's a mistake for us to sit here and go, we're a manufacturer, here's what we do. And I'm not arguing against very clearly defined guardrails about who you are and what you do, but I do think that more companies are being driven to become media companies, technology companies, to increase their capabilities and do all of these things well in new models to gain market share. So we've talked about a lot of things. I'm going to sum it up and I give you 3 sets of 5. 5 summary observations. The digitization of everything is penetrating every corner of our world. When we come back to this conference in 5 or 10 years, most likely this room will be connected, these tables, these chairs will be connected, the room will be connected, and it will have intelligence about who's in the room, who's paying attention, these sorts of things. Our customers, as you all know, are more empowered. And because of that, their attention is fragmented and their loyalty is declining. Transition to networks and the digitization of everything is enabling big bang disruption in every industry. More specifically, it will likely continue to enable this in your industry. Artificial intelligence, virtual reality, robotics, 3D printing, and the Internet of Everything is reshaping our world and reshaping our models. And if you go back to the example of what I read from Peter Diamandis, things may shift really rapidly. Consumer goods, generally speaking, has trailed several other industries, and it hasn't quite hit you yet. But I would expect in time, as price performance comes down and new capabilities are unleashed, it will, and it will do so rapidly. And remember, these smaller, more agile, more relevant brands are taking market share. It's something to keep in front of our mind. Hopefully, you already have a whole set of questions to take with you, maybe for after the session and the rest of the day when you go back to your offices. But for those of you that didn't, I created a little cheat sheet for you here, so get out your cameras. But really, how do we leverage emerging capabilities to offer unparalleled value in exchange for deeper understanding of our consumers? Think about what Under Armour does. They offer traditional value through their apps, significant value through their apps, and they're able to get a ton of data that informs their decisions. How can we reimagine consumption and distribution? Obviously, your customers, your longtime customers and distributors and retailers play a vital role in what you do and probably will for some time. But the mix and the roles may shift and may change. Ultimately, how do we shorten the time between desire and manifestation of consumption? How can we decouple our capabilities to be more customer responsive? If you think back to Blue Apron and the like, how can we deliver something like that? Is it in our best benefit to do that? Do the economics work out? How can we enable more co-creation? And ultimately, how do we create great experiences whenever, wherever? So 5 action items. Pursue customer intimacy. From blind to segments to personalized. We've gone from not knowing anything to now beginning to exchange a little bit of data with our retailers and get some semblance of understanding. But the trajectory across industries, obviously with high tech leading it, is to have personal understanding of each individual and to offer them highly relevant offers. How do we ultimately shorten the path between desire and manifestations? If there's anything you get from this session today, this is the question. And we could all work on the answer to this question for the next decade, because that's where the world is going. Trust is critical. It's important, and it's becoming more important. You can increase trust through simplicity, transparency, and great experiences. You all do lots of different things in here, but what I do know is new emerging technology that's coming at us at an exponential pace is creating new opportunities all over the place to fuel experience innovation. Focus on those, explore those, learn how you might be able to apply those to what your organization is trying to accomplish. And my hope is that the folks in this room will actually lead their organizations to create growth for their organizations. And I know if you do, you'll be rewarded. I want to thank you all for your time. It's been a pleasure to be with you here today. I want to wish you the best wishes on your journey, both for the conference and when you go back. My name is Brian Vellmure. Thank you.